All right.
And we are live for a very special ETBU Sportsnet show. Well, of course, we're not in our typical home Marshall Tiger room, of course, as we would normally like to be. As you can see, we are both quarantined in our respective places. I'm Kenneth the K-Rock Cline, quarantined in Houston, Texas. And, well, right above me is somebody that apparently has a mask on and of course, is in a hot spot down in New Orleans right now. But first and foremost, Mark T. Robinson, what's the deal with the mask?
I'm trying to stay Rona ready, Kenny. It's like you said, it's a little bit of a hot spot down here. So I'm just trying to make sure I stay safe, stay immune, and like I said, I'm trying to stay Rona ready. So that's what the mask is for.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hopefully everything is working out with you for the time being. But anyways, folks, it is time now to talk about something that has really been capturing our attention as of right now. As we all know, there's no sports going on right now, but there is a little bit of a March Madness feel to it, even though we're currently halfway in April. And that's because recently ETBU has posted a tweet with a bracket, a March Madness type of bracket to say the least. Now, this bracket, I should say, is about the top teams in the ETBU sports for the past 5 seasons. Obviously, this is every sport whatsoever. That includes basketball, baseball, football, golf, tennis, volleyball, softball. Like the best team in the past 5 seasons. That's how long Mark and I have been working together. So for the time being, it's drawn a lot of attention, Mark, and there's definitely been some interest as what's the feedback been for all those that have participated and seen this?
Well, I'll tell you what, Kenny, like you said, this is a March Madness type of feel, and it's perfect because we don't have any sports going on, no college basketball to look at per se. So this is kind of like our pseudo tournament here, and I tell you what, it's gotten a lot of feedback. A lot of athletes and fans have been kind of been engaged over the Twitter sphere, as I like to call it. But it's been exciting, Kenny, and I can't wait. There's been a couple of upsets, just like, a March Madness tournament always has. So I'm ready to get down to business. Let's go. I want to really get into these Elite Eight matchups and talk about some of those first-round upsets, man. I'm excited about this for sure.
Yeah, we'll get into those right as soon as possible. But why don't we just go ahead and get started? So our first Elite Eight matchup is basically 2 teams on the diamond. One of them, of course, is the ETBU baseball team in 2017. They came off a bit of a hard-fought heavyweight title fight against the 2014-15 men's basketball team that won the ASC championship. Now, this 2017 baseball team, they had a high number of home runs, 30 wins on the season. They won the American Southwest Conference Red Bracket Championship. The Red Bracket side, but then they lost in the American Southwest Conference Championship Series in 2 close games to UT Tyler as well. Their opponent is the 2016 softball team that won the American Southwest Conference Championship. Softball coming off a victory over cross country in 2018. That was led by Mac Broussard. But with softball's team, the championship, that was coming in a very difficult time, especially for the entire campus, having suffered a loss of 2 student athletes to a tragic passing. But, that was a huge deal for ETBU's softball team, winning 2-0 in the championship game behind the strong pitching Kelly Jo McClellan. And, of course, they would go on to compete in the NCAA regionals afterwards. But you obviously have 2 teams that were capable of winning the championship, the conference championship, going up against each other. And certainly, I think the biggest factor is just the following of, these 2 sides. What do you think about that, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, a lot of upsets here, and there's a lot of very interesting matchups. There's a couple I'm looking at here on our site here in the first round where I'm thinking, their first-year teams going up against, like, for example, we talked about golf going up against, women's basketball, 17-18 women's basketball. And I'm looking at it, it's kind of like, kind of unfair for a first-year team. But when you look at it, in a lot of the, March Madness matchups, the brackets, for college basketball. There's a lot of teams that a lot of low-ranked teams matching up against those upper-tier teams, but that's where your upsets come in, and that's what's made it exciting. But to me, what's been the most interesting thing is just the fact that so many fans have been engaged in our bracket, and I just really love the feedback and the support we're getting. You know, guys are all over Twitter talking about, no, I think that 17 baseball team was the best team, and then you got a lot of soccer guys lobbying for their 2018 team a couple years back, making some program history. So it's been fun. It's been interesting. And I just can't wait to break down what we have here for round two. It's been fun so far.
Yeah, it's definitely been fun. I think the baseball-softball matchup is definitely going to be one of the most intriguing Elite Eight matchups. I think it's one of two that really has the potential to be pretty close and hard fought, or to say the least. So depending on where all the students and all the fans vote, I mean, hey, that could be a big difference. I think the big factor comes in is who's got a bigger following, because these are the most respected programs in all of campus. Obviously, we know the success of softball for the last 10 or so years, going back to their championship in 2010, where baseball, the past 3 of the 4, I mean, they've definitely put themselves in position to win conference championships. They just hadn't gotten it done, but hopefully in the near future they will. But moving on now to our second Elite Eight matchup. You talk about upsets. We had a big upset with men's soccer, and obviously I feel like, you know, men's soccer, if there was an MVP, like if they don't win the whole thing, then one thing that they could win is the best campaign to start something. Because obviously, I'm talking about the 2018 men's soccer team. That team, of course, made the conference tournament for the first time in a while. It was the best season in a decade. And then, of course, they won their first round matchup against Ozarks 1-0. Went to double overtime against UT Dallas, where unfortunately their season came to an end. But they definitely made a case for themselves to be in the Elite Eight. They actually knocked off the 2019 softball team that won the American South Conference Championship. And as far as men's soccer's opponent, they're going up against a bass fishing team, 2019. Bass fishing, of course, first-year team, and they are definitely looking to make something here as they're trying to stop the train of men's soccer. Bass fishing came off a big upset over men's tennis. So, Mark, I mean, we're looking at a program that has probably the best in political campaigning, and another program that is best at making some big statements. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I first want to kind of talk about, you know, these two teams. I want to first talk about bass fishing, and then I want to talk about that 2018 men's soccer team, because I spent a good amount of time with both of these teams. And I first want to get bass fishing out of the way, just because obviously, you know, winning their conference championship, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, that, you know, when you win that conference title, you kind of automatically get into the realm of, all right, we've already made our case to move on to round two. But that's not always a guarantee to move on to round two. And what I love about this is, you know, obviously getting the fans involved in things like that. But what I love about it is the fact that all the playbooks, all the stats, all the so-called records, or so to speak, all the game planning is out of the window. This is strictly, you know, a lot of sports fans getting involved with this. But I want to talk about bass fishing right now is because, you know, winning their conference championship. But what a lot of people don't know is that a lot of work goes into them just preparing to get out on the water. They have to get up at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, just to prepare, you know, the rods, get the boat ready, make sure, you know, they've got their coolers set for the day. They could be out there upwards between 8 to 10 hours. It's different type of preparation from soccer. But again, these are guys on this bass fishing team that this is a thing that's kind of foreign to a lot of schools. There's only a certain amount of schools that even have a bass fishing team. So that alone kind of gives them kind of that edge, as that kind of wild card type of edge, if you know what I mean. The fact that there's not a lot of schools that have a bass fishing team. But now I'm going to move on to my 2018 men's soccer team. I spent a lot of time with this men's program. This is a team that was very gritty, very tough. They had guys like Daniel Rudder on the squad. that really helped to give them that edge. They had, Brian Botello as the keeper, one of the best keepers, I think, this men's program has ever seen. And I kind of watched them grow throughout that season, starting with that, that Georgia tournament or that Georgia road trip, rather, that they had going up against, tough schools like Southern, Birmingham, losing there, and then bouncing back, defeating Berry College off of a long goal by Silas Sangano. And this is a team that has really kind of risen to the occasion. The previous year in 2017, if you remember, they had some tough losses, just outside of kind of the rank of, this is a team, this is a force to be reckoned with. They were a little bit under 500, but then bouncing back, going 10-6, being led by a former head coach, Chris Crawford. And this is a team that can be kind of scary. And like you said, they're running the best, quote-unquote, political campaign right now because they have a lot of followers on Twitter that are really excited about promoting their team. And I was just looking at, kind of the Twitter feed last night, and there was a lot of guys talking about how, oh, man, you cannot forget that this 2018 team made program history, winning against Ozarks in the first round of the conference tournament. And not only that, they knocked off UT Dallas, who was ranked during the season just before the start of the tournament. I believe that was a 2-1 victory or a 3-2 victory, something like that. A lot of defense being played with this team. So I think, honestly, you could probably see this 2018 men's soccer team make some noise and make it to possibly the Final Four. I don't know, but we'll talk about our predictions a little bit later. But I think this matchup, this bass fishing team against this men's soccer team, is going to be fun. And I can't wait to see what the turnout is so far.
Yeah, a couple of things. Obviously, I don't do politics myself, but if we were somebody run for men's president or the president, it would definitely be the men's soccer team. And, of course, bass fishing definitely has a bit of an edge because it's probably the closest sport that is more towards the East Texas region, the Northwest Louisiana region, of course, as well. So, but I said there were two matchups in the Elite Eight that I think would be the most intriguing. One, of course, was baseball and softball. The other one that I think is probably going to be the intriguing, it's the case of the team that had the quickest turnaround to being successful against a team that's never had a rebuilding year, to say the least. They've continued to improve. I'm talking, of course, about women's basketball, 2017-18 season, and against the hockey team of this past season. Now, women's basketball, of course, in 2016-17, they were 3-22. They had a new coach who came in, brought in a new core of players, and all of a sudden, they just had this incredible season where they got off to a great start. They finished third, and then they shocked the entire conference by winning the conference championship, which was unbelievable. But then you add 3 more wins, you're playing in the Elite Eight with a chance to go to the Final Four, and you're within one possession of possibly taking a lead, but it just didn't happen for them. But they made it to the Elite Eight as well. And then on the other hand, with ETBU's hockey team, they never had a losing season. They obviously didn't win their conference this year, but they needed some help from teams within their own region to get in. And once they got in, they won an overtime game against a team they had beaten earlier to win their second game. So clearly, this is a case about championship versus experience and opportunity, to say the least. I mean, we're talking about a team that did it all in one season against a team that was continuing to build its program to successful, and possibly they can make some more noise for the next year.
Absolutely. And Kitty, and I tell you what, looking at this women's basketball team, I'm going to start with them because, like you said, they probably had the most dramatic turnaround I've ever seen in, our short time covering sports, to go from that 16-17 season, winning only 3 games, to all of a sudden not only winning 25 games and going all the way to the Elite Eight, but they won their conference championship, beating arch rival UMHB by 1 point. It was a 71-70 victory. I remember the scores. And then going on to the regional tournament and beating host UT Dallas, another arch rival in the ASC, and going on to the Elite Eight, and unfortunately losing to St. Thomas, Minnesota. But this is a team that was tough, that was gritty, that did not back down. And if you look at a lot of the teams, a lot of the games they played during the schedule during that season, it was a lot of close games. They weren't a whole lot of blowouts, so they were battle-tested on their way to the big tournaments. And I don't think you can count this team out because they definitely, like you said, shocked the world. This is the kind of stuff that movies are written about, are written out of from a team that is essentially, out of the in the back of everybody's mind, all of a sudden coming on the scene, winning 25 games or so, winning the conference championship. So I wouldn't sleep on this women's basketball team. In fact, I have them advancing even deeper into this tournament. We'll talk about that more in a few minutes, but can't sleep on this team. But now let's move on to hockey. Now, this is something that is – the thing that's very interesting about this matchup is the fact that this hockey team has become very, very popular. And they're kind of on the same line of bass fishing in that not a whole lot of teams, especially when you talk about teams that are down south playing hockey, like having hockey teams. Like, it's kind of weird. Like, but this is a team that has brought a lot of attention. A lot of fans are very interested and very intrigued in men's hockey. All of a sudden, they are one of the most now growing and popular sports at ETBU, and I can say that with a lot of confidence that they have a really big following. And not only that, they have a big-time international connection as well. So there's going to be some Canadians, some Swedes, coming in and kind of endorsing them to move on to round 3 of our tournament. So this is going to be an interesting matchup. But I think I have women's basketball coming out on top. That's kind of the way I'm seeing this. It's going to be close, but I see women's basketball moving on for the most part in this matchup, unless hockey can all of a sudden just kind of, overwhelm our Twitter feed with a number of followers. So we'll see. We'll see what goes on in this next round.
Yeah, definitely. That's probably going to be a big matchup that, if we were really honest, could be an overtime kind of matchup, to say the least. I mean, you can play overtime, but with hockey's case, it's like one goal and you win. Well, women's basketball has about 5 minutes to try to outscore the other team as well. So, yeah. But obviously, our final Elite Eight matchup is really the only, just double checking here, the only matchup of conference champions. And that, of course, is the ETBU football team from 2015 against the ETBU women's tennis team from 2017 as well. So we're talking about a pretty unique matchup, to say the least, because on one hand, we have a team that obviously has its own football complex, like right across from the office and right next to the football field as well, and against a tennis team that has been really successful for the last couple of seasons, of course. The football team, in this particular case, 2015, they won a conference championship, but it was really a tie for a conference championship along with Hardin-Simmons and Mary Hardin-Baylor. They won the game against Hardin-Simmons, which actually put them in position to win the conference championship. But then you have your women's tennis team, who not only defeated UT Tyler to win their first conference title, they also got to go to the NCAA regionals. They won their first round matchup, and then, of course, their season ended the second round. So, I mean, we're talking about two different styles here, two different stories. I mean, you can almost argue that this is about as David versus Goliath as you can possibly get with these matchups, to say the least. Not that there's any – not trying to make it a big deal, of course, because I feel like we're all Davids when it comes to being here at ETBU. But, I mean, football, tennis, whichever way you look at it, I mean, they definitely both have arguments to go to the next round.
Yeah, they really do. But here's the thing is that, football in and of itself is going to bring its own wave of 1,000+ followers. I mean, football is right up there with baseball in that it's one of our biggest, sites that we have as far as, following. So they're going to bring a lot of attention. A lot of people are going to vote for them and get behind them, especially if you look at that 2015 team in that championship game. Guys like Kendall Robertson had a record of 50 carries in that game, 193 yards. It was the Mud Bowl The field, if you go back and look, nothing but mud and dirt and rain, and it was really the heart of what football is all about. It was like 1950s football out there with that championship, so many carries and things like that. So obviously with head coach Josh Ergel at the helm, that brings back a lot of memories for a lot of ETBU faithful fans here. So I think it's going to be an uphill battle for women's tennis, although if you go back and look at what that women's tennis team did, again, they won 19 games. That's a program record. Head coach Jeff Bramlett really had that team, clicking at the right time, winning the ASC championship, beating UT Tyler. And I know you got to love that, Kenny. Anytime we can beat Tyler in anything, whether it's baseball, softball, tennis, golf, tic-tac-toe, bingo, it doesn't matter what it is. You just want to beat UT Tyler. You like seeing us take down those Patriots. But, again, that was a really big confidence boost for that program, obviously. But, again, it's kind of like that small mom-and-pop store going up against a big corporation that's taking over the town when you talk about football. But, again, when you look at the great movies, like one of the things that comes to mind in this situation, The Magnificent Seven, taking down the big corporation. So, we'll see what happens. It could be a dark horse matchup, but unfortunately, I got football advancing to the next round.
Yeah, I think if women's tennis were competing against any other, I feel like they would really have a legitimate shot of advancing. I mean, obviously, of course, maybe when this is said and done, they might make a move and overtake football, but it's going to be a really tough matchup. I mean, obviously, you're in Texas, and there's no sport that's bigger than football, obviously. And that's no disrespect to tennis, obviously. I mean, they've had some great times, but this is just a matchup that really isn't as favorable to them. Obviously, the only way women's tennis can beat football is if they compete against them one-on-one in certain matchups. So obviously, we now have gone over the Elite Eight matchup, of course, as well. And now we come to the part of the prediction show where we make our predictions.
My favorite part.
Yeah, obviously, we have some predictions here as well. So, Mark, obviously, you've said some of your predictions. We'll go over those in just a minute. But first matchup, baseball and softball. This is a matchup that I think is going to be pretty even. I mean, you had for softball, it was Kelly Jo McClendon, Rocky Tello, who was great pitching, and then the hitting of Lacey Lindsay, Jamie Perez, Caitlin Hollingshead, and then Lindsay Lewis, who was there for a season. So obviously she would develop into a great player. But then with the men's baseball team, Connor Combs, Zach Compton, Jackson Rader, Bryce Winter, Cameron Summerall, and then, of course, a shout-out to Brooks Lloyd, even though he's only known for one Grand Slam that won the game against UT Tyler, by the way. So
it's still legendary.
Yeah,
sure.
It's always that. But also the pitching, of course, for baseball. I mean, Cody Pierce, Ashley Dukes, trying to think of another couple guys. Kyle Wilson, of course. I think it would really kind of be one of those all-around back and forth kind of games, if we were being honest. But I think for this matchup, I would have to give the edge to baseball on this one because I think they have a big following as well. I mean, softball has been more successful than baseball for the last couple of seasons, but I think we're talking about a competition that is not based on success. If it was success, softball would have the edge. But this is kind of a popularity contest, which I don't really like for the most part. But I mean, this all engaging people. I think in terms of that, I would give a slight edge to baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. But I see where you're coming from, Kenny. But in this particular matchup, I think softball is going to get the edge because I think one of the things you're kind of overlooking a little bit is that softball, when they put their minds to it and when they really get their fans behind it, because softball has a pretty big following as well as arguably the most successful program for ETBU is the softball team. So I think when you get, head coach Janae Shirley behind the promotion of the program and the former athletes and the former players that came through that program, when you get them involved on Twitter, some interesting things can happen. And even though baseball is more popular as far as Twitter goes and followers and things like that, I think softball can rise to the occasion. And I have them advancing to the Final Four, slightly beating ETBU baseball. Even though when you look at the ETBU baseball team, like you said, they had a lot of guys that helped to kind of solidify the overall, record that still has yet to be broken in home runs and things like that. So you talk about a lot of offense and a lot of high-powered players for that team. But again, softball is a force to be reckoned with, and I have them moving on to the next round.
Definitely. And a team that I have moving on in our second matchup between men's soccer and bass fishing, I mean, if you can campaign well and you can get a lot of support, then I think you've got the edge going into it. I know that bass fishing has somewhat of a home field or home nature advantage, I guess, depending on
home nature. I love it, Kitty.
But I feel like men's soccer, with what they did, I think that's definitely going to help them propel to the Final Four as well.
Yeah. Anytime, like you said, a lot of times, when you winning a championship just isn't enough, as we saw with the 2019 softball team. Obviously, they won the ASC championship last year, but they were edged out by, the men's soccer team. But when you look at it, Kenny, I think that, like you said, with their ability to campaign, with their ability to get followers and get people to vote and things like that, they have some pretty, convincing men's soccer players. And a lot of history is tied to that 2018 team. I see them advancing as well. So we're in agreement on that. So I have the matchup with 2016 softball and 2018 men's soccer in the Final Four.
Definitely. Now, you talked about the women's basketball hockey matchup. You said that women's basketball would go to the Final Four. I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to disagree with you because I feel like, the thing that separates ETBU hockey from ETBU women's basketball, ETBU women's basketball, you play your traditional, Division III schools. And then, of course, you get to compete in the NCAA tournament, whereas club hockey, you don't compete with, a chance to compete for the Frozen Four. But you're playing against big-time competition. You're playing against the same Division I teams. You're playing against Texas A&M, Dallas Baptist. And then, they had some great – they played Auburn. They played Arkansas. That was just another matchup. I feel like you're getting exposed to Division I level, and you're not only doing it, but you're also beating them, which basically means that just because they're D1 and they get all the hype for all the other sports don't mean that, they're the better team. And, ETBU's hockey team is just making some noise. I mean, we're talking about good competition against, Big 12, SEC, and all those schools, and of course, as well. And, eventually it could get to the point where ETBU might be going up against some of the other most noteworthy schools, like out in UCLA or Oregon or something like that. And that's what I think separates it. I mean, these are guys that are playing a club sport, but because of what the sport is, who the following is, where some of these players are from, that's definitely going to give them an edge over women's basketball, I think. Now, I'm not taking anything away from women's basketball because that was a scrappy team, and that was definitely one of my favorite moments of calling the game. But I think if we're talking about from a following perspective, the edge would go to ETBU hockey.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Kenny, but I don't know. I think women's basketball is gonna rise to the occasion, just as they have done every single matchup that they've had almost during that championship year, and I wouldn't underestimate them. So, and I think maybe it may be the sentimental part of me that kind of wants them to advance, but who cares? Like we said, statistics are out of the window, the playbook's out of the window. I got them advancing to the next round, just barely edging out hockey. I know they got kind of the popularity going. I know they've got more of a following, so to speak, but I don't know, that 2017-18 women's basketball team, I just don't like to sleep on them, and I got them going in the next round.
You just want to be their number one fan, do you?
Probably.
I mean, seriously. I mean, no, I'm kidding. I mean, we both like the women's basketball team. But final matchup, obviously, football and women's tennis. We talked about the whole argument, like you said, the Magnificent Seven, where the group of outsiders go up against the big corporation and win. And obviously, I'm not to say that, women's tennis are the outsiders here, but they're going up against the football team, which obviously has, brings in a lot, to say the least. And, I think women's tennis could stand up to football, but the problem is you have about eight players on your team, whereas football, there's about over 75 to 100 players. And obviously, unless Gideon leads his army to help the women's team, I got to go with football on this one, just because I feel like they're a little they got a lot bigger following.
Yeah, you're right. And I didn't even think about the fact that, and it's so simple. It probably should be the first thing that's in the front of our minds, but you kind of forget that on a football team, there's like 75 to 80 players on a team. So each of those guys with a Twitter, multiplied by all the followers, multiplied by, all the family members and cousins and things like that kind of back them up. That automatically, kind of gives them that overall advantage. So I'm in agreement with you there. I think football is going to advance. And just off of popularity alone, I mean, in the great state of Texas, you know what I mean? I mean, and you say football, that's automatically going to draw a following. So I think, I hate to say it, even though that women's tennis team was fantastic with what they did, making program history, winning the championship, it's just it's going to be a little bit too much of an advantage for football. And I have them going on to the next round too. So we're in agreement there. Two we agree, two we disagree. So I think it's perfect. I think it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's just the way it has to be. We agree with some, we agree with disappointments, but hey, it really just comes down to who all the student athletes or who everyone that follows us, gets to vote for. All right, folks. So that concludes our talk prediction show. In case you guys are wondering how you can vote, all you got to do is go to our ETBU social media page or our Twitter account at goetbutigers.com. There will be a series of tweets with some polls, and all you got to do is just pick one. And I would say there's about a couple more hours or so, to tell you the truth, but not a couple of hours, but you guys still got plenty of time. But when the poll ends tomorrow, we will move on to the Final Four, and then we'll resume that. And then the championship, whichever two of the 8 teams makes it, will have a big battle, to say the least. So it's definitely going to be fun. And looking at it right now, there's about 15 and a half hours left. So you guys got plenty of time. So while you're dealing with all this crazy coronavirus stuff, you guys go and vote on our social media account. So that's just going to wrap things up here. Mark, any final thoughts before we, close out the broadcast?
Yeah. I just wanted to send my, my thoughts and prayers to all of those guys out there around the nation dealing kind of with this whole coronavirus thing. The best thing we can do right now, lift each other up in prayer and encouragement, and just continue to physically social distance yourselves, but stay involved. Obviously, like you said, you can go on Twitter and vote and things like that. So that's the great thing about technology. And I just want to say, before we sign off, good luck to everybody out there. Thoughts and prayers are with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing here. Obviously, it's a pretty crazy situation. I mean, I know Mark's in New Orleans, where it's kind of a hot spot for that. But I mean, down here in Houston, I mean, you go around the grocery store, and there's people obviously, taking advantage of the guidelines, wearing the mask, washing their hands, everything, 6 feet apart. You just got to keep it up. I mean, obviously, we know this is going to come to an end. It's just a matter of when it will. But for the time being, we're just going to keep supporting each other, keep loving each other, keep, doing what Mark and I are doing right now, social media distancing wise. So yeah, he's giving me a little bit of a thumbs up right there. So anyways, just keep this up, and we're supporting you. We're going to keep praying for you, and hopefully you guys, take care of yourselves and take care of your loved ones as well. So that's going to do it from here. From New Orleans, that's Mark T. Robinson. Mark, say bye.
Peace out.
And I'm Kenneth the K-Rock Cline down here in Houston. That's going to take care of business for the ETBU Sportsnet. We will see you guys next time, and hopefully in much better circumstances. Take care.